Okay guys, in this video I'm just going to rank all the modifications I've done to the car. 40 of them, 40. No accessories and things I use for camping, but things I've done to the car itself. I'm going to rank them from least favourite to favourite, or useful to most useful. It's kind of an arbitrary ranking system, but it is what it is. So we're going to start from 40, counting up towards number 1, and then there's a few bonus things I'll have a quick chat about. To be honest, I just completely forgot to write them down in the list. So 40 modifications ranked from worst to best with a couple bonus items. Let's start with number 40. Number 40, not the GoPro, but next to it, we've got the dash cam. The reason this is the worst is I kind of just forget it's there. I thought I would use the footage. I thought I would take the SD cards out when I needed to and implement the footage into my videos, but I just never do. I just mount a GoPro here instead. It's easier. I can stop and start the footage. It's easier to find the files, and it's better quality footage as well. Negatives, I don't think I need it. Hopefully never do. Positives, it was dirt cheap. Next on the list is the diff breathers. Basically, the factory diff breathers are so high up in the engine bay anyway. The only one that I really ended up raising was the rear one, and even that was probably high enough for what I do that it would never get submerged anyway. So to me, not the most useful way to spend your time, but if you're doing lots of river crossings, obviously it is something you want to do. Next up is the roof console. The reason this is so low down is it is such an unessential thing. Nobody needs a roof console. Extra storage is handy, so that's a positive. And for me, one of the big ones, I personally like having the UHF up here. There are other mounting options where you can see as well, but I can see the volume, the channel, I can grab it easily, and the speaker is up here at sort of ear levels. I feel like it's the best spot to have the UHF, just hooking the cord up like that. But the reason it's low down on the list, you absolutely don't need something like this. It's mostly aesthetics, a little bit of functionality. It does kind of block your vision a bit, and you can bump your head on it getting in and out of the car or leaning over to grab something from the other seat. You don't have that high ceiling like you would in a Troopy, for example. Now, next up is the intercooler hose upgrades that I did. Positive is the reliability, the firmness of it as well, so it won't expand so much under boost, and it should, in theory, deliver air a bit quicker with less lag. Truth be told, you won't notice the difference. The reason it is low down on this list is reasonably expensive, not necessary. To me, it was more of a reliability upgrade, but I still recommend people carry spares anyway, because any hose can split no matter how good a construction it has if something goes wrong. So I wouldn't say it eliminates the problem. If you don't have the money, I wouldn't personally bother too much with this. So next up, we've got the shower and pump setup, which you can't see at the moment. Obviously I'll overlay B-roll, but I've hard mounted mine inside the canopy. So I have these hoses here permanently, and what this does is allows for a quicker setup and pack up time, because there is no packing up really, just draining the hoses. So the negatives, I've got a 6 litre per minute pump, and if you don't run it through the heater and you just want to run it cold water, not at the moment because it's winter, but in summer, I'll just run cold water and it goes through water really fast. There's no control on the flow rate. So I'm thinking of downgrading to a 4 litre per minute pump. I don't need 6 litres a minute. You want to save it as much as possible. The other downside is I fixed it now, but it did used to have a small leak in the canopy, which is the worst place obviously, and I fixed that with some tape, but it means I won't be changing from this plastic hose back to the shower hose. So ordinarily I would have had this connected, because this connects straight to the pump, 5 metres, run it out and shower yourself. In winter, you have to go through well, you don't have to, but if you want hot water, you have to use this hose into the unit and this off the hot water unit going out. Because that one leaks, I've had to tighten it, use thread tape and everything. Now I don't want to disconnect that one, and I'm connecting that with this and hoping this doesn't leak or burst. So I do like having it hardwired, because the power setup right here, switch up here, plug it into the SIG socket there when I need it, switch it on, and it's good to go. Just drop that in a bucket or that jerry can if I need to. The other thing is there are alternative things on the market, things you can take in and out of the car as you need them, so that's why that's down here. on the list. So next on the list, transmission oil cooler. Positive is it definitely works. I've got the temperatures monitored and I noted the difference before and after install. It's at its most effective when you have some sort of speed or wind flow through the cooler. It does block the radiator and the intercooler a little bit, so that's a downside for me, and also it can get in the way of winch control boxes and things at the front here, so a few negatives. The other negative is, for me, it's not a necessity. It's good because the vehicle is a bit heavier now, probably 2.7 tonne or thereabouts, but I'm not towing, so I wouldn't call it a necessity. I think people can get away without it. However, I'm all about reliability, so for me it is a really good bit of equipment that is doing its job. So next up, we've got the UHF system. I'm including this as a whole system, so including that fold down bracket and the antenna on the roof. And the reason this is mid-range for me, it's not so much a fault of the system, but it's more I haven't really had a chance to test it out properly yet. So I find it hard to rank it a little bit higher. I tend to travel by myself, so I'm not always in communication with people, and I haven't done any range tests with I've got the smaller antenna, I think it's 2.1 decibel, but I've mounted it on the roof for as good a range as possible. A necessity when you're traveling by yourself, but I can't rank it any higher without putting it through its paces a little bit. I probably would have put it on the secondary battery, and I can make those changes because I have a feed behind the switch panel for it, but I don't really care that much. But yeah, good system, has never done anything wrong, but hard to rate higher. Now, next on the list is what I'm standing under. It's a big 270-degree awning. Positives about this, one of the main ones for me was the lightweight. It's only 20 kilos and you get a lot of coverage. Very happy with the weight. It's a cheapish option, it's not very expensive, and the coverage is awesome. Negatives, a lot of the time I'm not sitting somewhere long enough to be bothered setting it up. A freestanding awning would be a lot better in that instance where there's not too much wind. You can just whip it out and you're done in about 30 seconds. This one does take a little bit longer. Another negative is that it is quite weak. It is not very strong at all. I've actually recently broken it. I mean, the forecast was for no wind, so I went to bed just with the poles and the Velcro straps around the poles, dug the poles into the sand so they wouldn't move too much. I was pretty happy with it, given the forecast was for no wind. I woke up in the morning and it was on the ground. Two of the legs had snapped off here, so kind of my fault, but it wasn't that windy. Not 100% sure what happened, didn't hear anything. It's obviously can't support itself for very long at all if you're not watching it. I guess my fault for not tying it down. I don't think I'm going to go through the hassle of getting spare parts for it because I don't think it's amazing quality. However, it is lightweight, has a great area, and once you do set it up, it's really good. Next on the list is the fire extinguisher and I guess the bracket, the whole system. So I've got this on the passenger side and I can reach it from the driver's seat, or I can reach it from this side of the car, which is where I do the camping. Easy to grab, quick release, not too expensive, so it's just kind of middle of the pack at the moment because I've never had to use it, but definitely recommend everyone has one of them. Okay, next up we've got the overhead shelf. The reason this is low on the list is because you don't need it. I think it's really handy. It does add a little bit of weight, 8 or 9 kilos, but it helps separate your items so you have a split between floor and shelf, which means things are easier to find. Without it, everything easily fits down here. You're just having it all tied up under the ratchet straps. I wish it was a little bit lower, and I can change that by adding more spaces and stuff, but I do wish they dropped it just down a little bit more for me personally, but I could understand why people wouldn't need that. Because you have this lip on the canopy that comes down, you lose a bit of space trying to get longer items in there. You can't actually get them into the shelf because of the way the canopy is built. So next up is the MaxTrax mounting. And basically it's just a bit of flat plate, 2 holes in it, and then you align your roof bars. Obviously this is only applicable to people with these sorts of bars and that, but yeah, if you've got channel and you can save a shitload of money, just go to RS Components or even Bunnings, buy some flat plate and stick your mount through there at the right space, and you've got a cheap mounting system. It's probably lighter than the purpose-built mounting systems and it's cheaper as well. I can't really think of a downside to it, except I guess there's a little bit more work involved than buying a purpose-built MaxTrax mount. So it's kind of mid-range in the pack because it's pretty simple, pretty basic and not that exciting, but I mean, for cost effectiveness and strength and stuff, it hasn't let me down so far. Next one on the list, hopefully I've got some nighttime footage to show you, but I really like the 3-stage setting. I don't think the orange lights are bright enough. If you compare it to the white light, it's a lot brighter on the white than it is the orange, but most of the time I prefer to use the orange. And the other thing is, it makes a beeping noise, a buzzing noise. So it goes away on the brightest setting, but sometimes I don't want the brightest setting. I'm not sure if that comes through on the mic, but there's a high-pitched buzzing noise. I don't always want it on the highest setting. In fact, I very rarely want it on the highest setting, so that is annoying. So yeah, I love the sleek design. I love the 2 colours and the 3 power settings. Definitely a good light outside of that buzzing noise, which is annoying. So next up, we got the USB power system. Yeah, really good. I've ended up switching the USB power because I don't like these little LEDs that I just think they're pointless and a waste of power themselves. Not that they draw much, but this is great for charging my phone, speakers, and obviously all my camera gear. There is some camera gear I have to charge off 240 volt, like my laptop and the drone, because otherwise it just won't get done quick enough, and nobody makes USB-C outlets with enough wattage output, preferably a 60 to 90 watt, but just doesn't seem to exist at the moment. SIG socket comes in handy for anything. Plug a little fridge in there. I've got the shower pump just there ready to go. It's always handy to have a SIG socket somewhere in the car. Negatives, I don't like these little LED lights, but that's pretty small negatives. And the other one is, it was quite hard to find USB-C outlets. Everybody's still stuck in the old system of USB-A. Pretty much everything I own now is USB-C to USB-C, so I don't know why the 12 volt industry is so slow to catch up. I had to get a couple of these on Amazon, and they do run quite deep as well, so there's quite a tight bend on the back here before the installation. That's probably the only other negative I can think of. They haven't let me down so far, so pretty happy with them. Next up, not the light but the reverse camera up here. I've got it in a rear view replacement system. Positives are it's cheap, and once you get a canopy on, you are absolutely blind. It is especially important around shopping centres and car parks and stuff like that. You want to see what's behind you, especially people just run behind your car when you're reverse parking. Without it, I do feel a little bit blind. There are plenty of negatives though. The mounting bracket that it comes with in general is crap, so I've actually had to Sikaflex it in just to get it to where I want it to point. Plenty of positives though. It also doubles as a dash cam. So you're getting your constant feed for your own safety when driving, but you also got a reverse dash cam. Negatives, as soon as it rains, you pretty much don't count on it. Eventually it'll get a splash or something on it, and this isn't this camera specific. But on top of that, there's been a few times in winter after rain where it has stopped working. So I'll lose the feed completely, it'll have grey fuzzy lines through it, and that is why it's a bit further down on the list. It would be a lot higher if it was a bit more reliable. Every time it has dried out, it's come back good, so I haven't replaced it yet because it keeps coming good and I can't be asked running a new cable around for a new camera. Yeah, it loses a few points there because it does feel a little bit cheap and tacky at times. However, at the moment, she lives on. It's not too big of an investment, and the rear view vision that you get is awesome. Almost essential, I think, because it just makes you a safer driver. So you have brightness control, you can swipe, you can scroll down, and it just sits on your rear view mirror. You don't really think about it once it's all done and wired in. So next on the list is the engine bay wiring upgrades that I've done, mostly centered around the Bluetooth Safety Hub 150. This thing is incredible. I do wish I had a better place to mount it, which is not the fault of it. So you've got 6 ATO fuses built in. So all you do is connect to your bus bar. You've got a negative bus bar, which I love. And then you have 4 MIDI fuses as well. I've got 1 MIDI fuse in use, and that does the battery management system in the back. And then I've tidied up all the crap that was here originally, that was on the battery post, and I've moved it to here. So I've added the reverse camera and some other relays that I want to come on with ignition. I've actually used up all 6 spots. So the only negative for me was I actually wish I had more ATO spots. If I had another 2, 4 MIDIs, I'm fine with that. Another couple ATO fuse spots for me would be awesome, but obviously it would make the unit larger. However, I cannot fault this, and I like having a clean and tidy engine bay. I don't know how to put the cover on. I hate the batteries on these cars. They are the recessed posts. It's just crap. There's not much room around the battery, and trying to fit accessories, like trying to get the winch directly onto the battery, is an absolute pain in the ass. So I've got this Unilug post double up, which has allowed me to attach the factory flag style cable, which I think is to do with all your engine sensors, engine control module and stuff. So you can't just chop that and lug it. It's a weird sort of P-clamp, and then I've got the winch on this other post here. So that Unilug has allowed me to do that, and obviously I've got it on the active as well. Massive thumbs up for this. Not happy with the Ford Ranger Mazda BT-50 battery arrangement and the amount of space behind it and the recessed posts, but these upgrades go a little bit of the way to improving that. So next on the list, you can't see it, but in here is a pre-fuel filter, and this one here is the catch can. Kind of one of those uninteresting things, but I think I've got it so high up because the fuel filter definitely is essential. The catch can, you still get arguments either way, but I've decided to install it anyway. I can say that it does work. I have drained it, it does catch oil. The pre-fuel filter, the reason it's not higher, because I do think it's really, really good. The reason it's not higher is because the design with a glass bowl on the bottom, so you can check the glass bowl, see if there's water in there, drain it, etc. On this make and model of car, 0% chance you're going to check that glass bowl. If you take this thing out, if you go through the hassle of removing this pre-fuel filter, you may as well change the filter. You may as well drain it and change the filter. So I upgraded it with a water sensor alarm, which, if it works, will alarm when there is enough water in the glass bowl. So that's the biggest negative for me. The location, the glass bowl, absolutely useless in this specific car, but it gains points for being such an essential item. Catch can as well, takes up a lot of room, which is annoying. Has some sharp edges on these clamps, the hose clamps, but you can't twist them the other way because you need to clamp them with your pliers to get them on and off. But yeah, besides that, it's doing a pretty good job. Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. Next up, recovery points. I'm surprised my dodgy paint job's still there. I didn't scratch it up, the surface. I didn't use any primer, so I'm surprised that's still red. This is the tie down point, the factory one, and the recovery point follows the exact same form line, so it doesn't add any depth. I was really happy to find these because the alternative was the road safe ones, and they look like they hang down here. They look absolutely ridiculous. I haven't rated them higher because I haven't had to use them, but essential if you're doing lots of sand driving, especially if you've got mates with snatch straps. I do also have the winch as well, so I can get myself out of trouble. But if you're travelling with other people, you need recovery points to be recovered. Only negatives, I can't really think of many negatives. Bit of a pain to fit, and they add weight to the car. That's about it, really. Next one on the list, you can't actually see it, but the sound deadening. This is a tough one for me to judge because I've had it for so long. It's hard for me to remember what the car used to sound like. However, I really like the fact, the peace of mind, knowing that on long drives, I have as quiet a condition as possible inside the cab. I guess the negative here is I think I added about 27 kilos to the car, so that's the biggest negative. And also, I'm not sure on all models, but this is XRT model. When I lifted the carpet, there was a factory sound deadening mat there, not the anti-vibration style, but the mass noise liner. So it was a lot of work that probably wasn't required, and the gains are minimal. So the gains, I've done a video on it, I can't remember what they were, but they were noticeable, but they weren't massive. So on an older style car, a really tinny sort of car, absolutely, I think it'll make a massive difference. On newer utes, especially the higher spec ones, if you lift up your carpet and you have an existing good quality sound mat underneath, I would recommend not going through the hassle of doing the floor. Maybe do your roof and door panels if you really want. Yeah, so for me, negatives: cost, weight, time to install. Bring this one right down. Positives are just that peace of mind, knowing that on long drives, I am doing less damage to my hearing. I'm having the music down, hopefully a little bit lower, and all these sorts of things that will help with driver fatigue. Now, seat covers. I've got black duck 4 elements. Haven't really had to do much with them. You install them, you forget about them. I think $500 for the 2 front seats and the headrest. It's kind of it at the end of the day. I haven't even washed them yet, but yeah, they're comfy, no wear and tear. They still sit nice, they're not wrinkled and everything, so I can't fault them at the moment. And I think for protecting the seats underneath, even though One day I might replace it with an aftermarket seat, but for protecting the seats underneath, especially if you're coming in and out of salt water, or you, I don't know, get mud on your pants or something because you're under the car, it's just so good to know that they're protected, I guess, and you can wash them. $500, they'll probably last you 10 years. Inverter, it gives me 240 volt power, just got enough to do DeWalt battery charger, laptop, drone batteries, and I can actually run my milk frother off this. Just basically maxes this out, but it can just do it. So this for my 240 volt needs is absolutely perfect. Because I haven't gone the max that the battery can discharge, I've kept it lower standby power draw, so when it is on, it's not using as much to convert. Can't think of too many negatives, to be honest. It's only got the one outlet. I guess that would be a negative. And if you want RCD protection, you have to do this whole wiring crap here. With the 240 volt, this load sensor with RCDs, completely unnecessary. I did it for different reasons, to do with plans I had for the future of the canopy, which I might go into at another time, but you can easily just plug a power board into here and just mount it on the headboard. You don't need this whole setup here, so a little bit unnecessary. That one, depending on what you want to do with the car. All right, next up, we got the Blue Sea Safety Hub 150. Same one that I got in the engine bay. Just an awesome bit of kit that centralises everything. The midis, I've got the inverter off one, and I've got each compressor motor, because it's a twin compressor, off the other two. Then I've got one spare MIDI fuse. Off the ATOs, I've got the switch LEDs, I've got the canopy lighting outside, I've got the interior lighting, I've got these USBs. So again, the only negative I can think of, yeah, I really wish there's a couple more ATO fuses I could definitely use inside the canopy. Legend X 3-inch mandrel bent, blah blah blah. This is 2015 car, so no DPF, so it's from turbo back. For something I still consider as very low priority for people doing up their cars, I've actually really enjoyed it. Unlike the intercooler hoses, I feel like I could feel a difference with this. Very minimal, but I just felt like the car drove a bit better. One of the biggest positives for me, it's not a stupid drone while I'm driving. I don't really notice it, but on startup and acceleration, it still sounds pretty cool. I didn't want something too loud. I'm not into that sort of, I love the sound of other people with those cars, but I wouldn't want to drive one. Negative is it's not necessary. People just starting out, you don't need an exhaust. It can be one of the last things you do. The cost as well, for me, I thought it was quite reasonable, but it's a cost you can do without. And obviously don't touch it when it's hot. I know this is cold. I didn't think it'd be this high and loose, but I actually really enjoy it. The reason it's not higher is it's in no way necessary. So we're in the top 20. I think we're about 18 now, but the winch is next. Traveling alone, I think it is essential. I haven't put it through its paces. I've done a test run, obviously, just to see everything works and to tighten up the drum under some tension so it doesn't bind when I actually need it. That's about the only run that I've done on it. Yeah, it drops down the list a little bit because the weight it adds so far in front of the axle is a lot. So if you're not traveling with other people, you probably need one. If you are traveling with other people who have straps, or maybe someone else has a winch, you could probably say that you don't need one. I only have one because I travel by myself, so hopefully I never have to use it. But if I do get really stuck, that is like a last resort sort of backup that'll hopefully save my ass. It gains points, obviously, not too expensive. I got it on special, and even though it adds a lot of weight to the front of the axle, this is the lightest one I could find. So it gains points for being lightweight. For me, it is very nice to have. So I wired this up with in-cab controls as well, and I've even got an in-cab isolator. So hopefully that never fails. I'm not sure about the quality of that, but the winch itself I can't fault. So these tie-down rails, I've got 3 of them. It's saved me 10 to 15 kilos from getting a roof bar, or roof rack I should say. And these are just little aluminium channel that I've got channel nuts in, tied everything down to. It's not ideal for everyone because some people might like to load up their roof, but everything I put on the roof is a fixed item. Maxtrax solar panel, UHF antenna, I've got a little J-box here for my wiring. Total weight, these 3 combined is probably less than 2 kilos. Massive positive for me, cheap, easy, lightweight install. The negatives is, I guess, the strength of it and the channel nuts and that. I don't think I fully trust it with the awning. There are some things I want to change as far as bringing the awning inboard a bit, so the overhanging bulk of the awning sits on the bar and then the bracket's there, so it's not holding as much weight. It's not an engineered system. There's no guarantees on the strength of it. I don't think it's going to be any issues with the panels and the Maxtrax. With the awning, because you have a bulk weight on the awning tilting it, I think I need to bring the awning in a bit and get the bulk sitting on the bar itself. Well, you lose 150 mil in awning coverage out the side, but that's no big deal. And then I've got this north-south one here that just helps me get things from the front to the back. Now I'm combining this with the roof bars because this is just more aluminium strut here. I've got these eye bolts through here and I just hook ratchet straps up across here. That gives me a north-south tie-down point. So I've got another one just behind the draw table combo. Next on the list is the exterior floodlights. I've got 5 around the car. I've got 2 on the right, 2 on the left, 1 on the back. The output is good. It's good enough for camp, but it's good enough for driving at night time if you want to light up the side of a track. So they are Light Force Ultra floods. They spread more than they do spot. So it's not like a distance thing. I didn't want high power, high distance. I wanted more of a camp style setup just to spread the light around, and they do that brilliantly. Power draw, probably just over 1 amp hour per light, I think, off memory. I haven't actually looked at that since I first installed them. I would have liked if they had a sectioned stem on it that was spring loaded, so you could pull it down, twist it, put it back in a notch. Say you had 20 different sections, so you could set your main light orientation, but then you can move it by pulling it down, twisting it into the next notch, and it just spring load back up. Not that I've ever wanted to change them that much. I've kind of set them to leave them hopefully forever, but it would be super handy if they had some sort of system where you could move them around if you wanted to. The only other negative for the floodlights, again, it's not really a fault of the lights, it's kind of my fault, but I'll show you down the back. This rear flood I installed without thinking about the rear wheel and the bin bag. So when I'm using the trundle drawer, this is sort of where I use to cook because I've got gas bottles here. This rear light, the reverse light, it is a reverse light, but it was also meant to be sort of for camping here as well. It is blocked by the rear wheel and the bin bag. Now, I'm only running 5 wheels. I can move that rear wheel underneath, but what that means is that spindle for the rear wheel protrudes inside the canopy, so that's not ideal. The alternative is this S-shape or Z-shape bracket. I could put another one on back to front, which comes out here and has the light a bit higher, or I can bring it over to the side here and have it shining down sideways onto the cooking area. Very bright and powerful, great for reversing. At the moment for cooking and stuff, it's not getting its full effect. That's my fault, it's not a fault of the light, but that is a negative for the whole system. Next up is the solar panel, and the reason I love this because it allows me to run a smaller battery because I don't need as much storage, because this will refresh during the day most of the time. If you are not driving for a long time, you need a solar panel. If you're not driving for a long time in a place with a lot of cloud and rain and storms, you might need to go a bigger battery. For me, most of the time there is some sunlight. The amount of times I do stay in one area, I can get away with a smaller battery because I have 180 watt solar. Yeah, the output that I get from it is really good. Even in cloudy conditions, I do get some output from here, input into the batteries. Set and forget, so I don't have to pull up ever and set up blankets. I just forget about it. I do have the option to parallel it up with the blanket if I ever needed to, but I've never felt the need. At the moment it's winter, and yesterday it was raining all day, and when I went to bed, the battery still had about 80%, so it had done its job just by maintaining that level when I was charging drones and laptops and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty happy with the solar panel. All right guys, next up is the fridge. This is the Bushman 80 litre, and yeah, it's great. I don't notice the noise, the power draw. It's enough space for me. It is heavier than they advertise, which I think is a downside. Not by much. I can't remember the weights. I did it on the video. Might be about 2 or 3 kilos heavier than what they advertise. Negatives for me, freezer, I think, is about 8 litres. So I'll just close this up, but freezer is about 8 litres. It's okay, but it's not brilliant. So this is the 85. The next one up is 130. This height from canopy door to floor is pretty consistent across all canopy manufacturers, and the 130 or 135 is too big for that height. The 85, you have this clearance here. I personally wish they had something in between the 85 and 135, and then you could add another 10 litres to the fridge and another 10 to the freezer. That would make this very, very capable. and it could take up a bit more of this spare space here. It could even almost keep the same width. For people that want to go really, really remote, you will need a bigger freezer. So you'll be looking at your dual zone chest style fridge freezers, or you'll be running something separate so you can freeze more stuff. For 99% of people, it's probably enough because you'll be stopping in towns every now and then. You can always top up, and frozen items in the top of the fridge, you can do different things to make the top of the fridge more like a freezer anyway. My only negative, I guess, it's quite expensive, I think is a negative. I think the size isn't the perfect mix between fridge and freezer. So I think, yeah, 85 is fine, but if you had even a 95 with another 5 litres freezer, 5 litres fridge, or 105 with 10 extra in the fridge and 10 in the freezer, something like that would be a good mix for these styles of canopy, which are pretty standardised. They all have basically the same opening height. On the flip side, you can use the top of this as a shelf, as I'm doing now. That is very handy. So next on the list, we got the snorkel, Safari snorkel. Didn't think I would rate it as much as I did, but I do like the security, the peace of mind, knowing that if for some reason I find myself in a sticky situation through something that was a little bit deeper than I thought it was, for example, then this is a fully sealed system, high air intake. I'm not fully sold on the clean air intake, the colder air up top. Like, I don't think it's going to make that big a difference to fuel economy and all these other promises that they make. But for me, the biggest positive is it's about $460 if you install it yourself. So it's cheap as chips, really, for what you get out of it for peace of mind. And the cost of it, which is a fair cost because it's just a bit of plastic. So it's not like they're undercharging for it. It's definitely a reasonable price, but it does a lot for your engine. It rates pretty highly just because of that. So next up, we got the wheels and tyres. I'm combining as one. I can't rate them higher at the moment because I can't say that I've put them through a full life cycle. It's not like I've done 70, 80,000 Ks on them. I've probably done just over 10,000 Ks on them. Can't fault them, the wheels or the tyres. Have taken a hit to one of the rear wheels. It sounded pretty bad, but nothing. Nice and strong. I really like, it's not a major thing, but these little indents here, every time I'm inflating and deflating, just being able to put my little stem cap in here so I never lose it has been really handy. These all-terrains, they bag out nice. I don't really know what to say because I can't say that I've tested it through very harsh terrain, but grip in the wet on the road, grip in the dry, inflating, deflating, no dramas whatsoever. Pretty happy with the size. I haven't found clearance to be too big an issue at all at the moment. These are roughly 31.5. Downside obviously is the cost. You're going to buy 5 alloys or 6 if you want 6 wheels. That's going to cost you a lot more than it would to get 5 or 6 steels. One day I might have 33s, I might have mud terrains, I might have steel wheels, but for now I think this is absolutely perfect. I haven't gone for the big radius tyre, the big diameter, so better fuel economy, better mileage. That also helps deliver the power onto the road. So better braking, better handling, better acceleration. Yeah, very, very happy with these. Would rate them higher if I'd used them for longer, but just haven't used them long enough to properly rate them yet. So next up are my 3 switch panels. I've got right hand side of the canopy, left hand side of the canopy, and one in the cab. Right hand side controls the floodlights on this side for when you're at camp. That is 2-way switch with the cab. So in the cab I can control reverse, right and left hand side. This is a 2-way switch for the interior lights. It doesn't actually turn them on and off, it just isolates them. I've got my USB power and then I've got a spare. The switch panel in the cab, it has taken up my centre storage space, but I didn't really need it or use it anyway. So from here I've got a spare, I've got right hand side, reverse, left hand side. Then I've got winch in and out controls, and then I've got another spare on the far left. So this is brilliant because I can turn on the track side lightings from the driver's seat, and I can turn on the reverse light from the driver's seat as well. In here I do have my winch isolator. This is an automated reverse light, so this will turn it on when the car's in reverse and then off when it clicks out of reverse. Otherwise, I can just do manual control from here. So the negative for me, this left-hand switch panel is kind of hidden behind the fridge and everything. Doesn't have the best access. You kind of have to remember what each switch does because you can't really see the front of it. In hindsight, I would have put a little bent bit of flat plate here coming across here, and I would have had a switch panel sitting here for all the switches. The other negative is if something goes wrong here, there is absolutely no way I'm getting to the wiring at the back here without having to remove the entire fridge setup. And to remove the fridge, I need to remove the drawers. So if anything goes wrong with the wiring at the back here, I am completely screwed. It's going to be a massive job to fix it. Even though I kind of know what they are, other people won't know what they are. So having them up here would have been better. So next up, I've got the battery and the charging system, just combining them. That's the Red Arc Battery Manager 30. With that, I've got the Red Vision display, the better, more sleek looking variety that gives you a few different screens and graphics of all your inputs and stuff. Battery Manager 30 as a central hub is brilliant. I didn't think 30 amp hours would be enough, but it definitely is, because I've only got 125 amp hour battery. Going with lithium has saved me 20 kilos or whatever. That is 125 amp hour lithium, 100 amp hours usable. I've never got it below 60% because of the solar and the fact that most of the time I'll drive somewhere throughout the day. The fact that it has solar priority was a decision for me in purchasing, but I actually don't think that's that relevant now anyway. I would love it if it was 40 amp hours. I think that would make it basically irreplaceable. If I had a massive system, I don't think I ever will, but say if I had 300 amp hours, probably wouldn't be running with a 30 amp hour input, because if you've got that bigger battery system, 250 plus amp hours, you're probably using a lot of power. So you probably got a massive inverter and you probably want to input as much as possible if you're driving a short distance. So wouldn't recommend the BMS 30 for someone with a massive system, but for me, it has proven to be absolutely spot on. This battery, can't fault it. It's never failed, so it's really hard to judge. All I can judge it on is it being lightweight and working. So the only negatives I can think of is, even though this inverter is 600 watt, I can go higher, probably to about 1200 watt or 1000 watt, because of the maximum discharge on this battery. So if I wanted a bigger inverter, I would have to change the battery out. The other thing is, I could have actually gone, in hindsight, I could have gone for a slimline that fits in between the fridge and the headboard. So there's one from Allsparks, for example, 150 amp hour. So it's actually an extra 25 amp hour capacity, has a higher continuous output discharge rate. So it could have also fit with a larger inverter. Not that I need it, but in theory. However, all that really means is I'm bringing stuff from the fridge, all my laundry stuff, to another place. So it frees up storage here, but I've actually got stuff stored in between the fridge, but there were other options available. With the battery, not a massive discharge rate, but I knew that when I bought it. It's not like something I figured out that's a negative. I knew that when I bought it because I didn't need a high discharge rate. So really happy with the charging system. One other thing I could have done with my whole charging system is move the BMS 30 over this way. So everything's on the right hand side of the headboard. And with the combination of moving that switch panel I was talking about later, I could have moved the fridge right up to the headboard, moved the drawers up, and I would have had more space at the back of the cab. Yeah, you never really know everything when you're planning things. You kind of figure things out later. So that's the battery charging system. Making it into the top 10 is the drawer and table combo. I get a lot of use out of this. I especially like the table, just the half length there if I want to prepare breakfast or whatever. Can go the full length if you want something a little bit larger. I've spilt coffee on this one, but so far the rollers are still working well. I like that because it gives me somewhere to stand up and offload all the footage at the end of the day, do some editing. It's kind of like a little standing desk. And the drawer itself, yeah, it's big and it's sturdy, and I've got a lot of stuff in here. I don't know what I'll do without this drawer space. Pots and pans, cups and plates and dry foods. I don't have a pantry set up. This is kind of most of my pantry along with this. And then the other benefit obviously is the mess that you can see on top here, but I've got bin, laundry, dish tub, a few more pantry items. There's a big space on here, so you can alter that however you want it. You got tie down straps and stuff as well. So the only negative for me is the cost and the weight. I think this is about 33 kilos. I'll have the proper weight on the screen, but yeah, the only negative I can think of is probably the weight. Everything else about it is really good. Another positive, it's not really to do with the drawer, but the space that it creates here. You have this little vertical pocket of space so you can stand things upright, squeeze them in there. Everything's nice and sturdy, not getting rattled around. Kind of a byproduct of the drawer, but that's another positive as well. So next up, it's kind of hard to get a shot of this, but we got bash plates. So these are brilliant. They do the job. I went for the aluminium ones because of their lightweight. To be honest, if you're going for 3mm steel, you don't save that much weight. Like, you might save 5 kilos, but if the difference between the alloy ones from bush skins these are, between like a 4mm steel is quite significant. For 3mm steel, you're not going to save a massive amount of weight. Aluminium bash plates, I went all the way back to the transfer case. So I've got transmission, transfer case, and the front two plates that replace the factory one. The only downside, I guess, it's about $1,000, but as far as I'm concerned, cheap insurance. It helps you skate over the sand a little bit and just protecting your transmission and all the stuff under there. For me, I couldn't do without them. These are very high up on my list of bash plates. I've heard them take a few hits, and I'd hate to think what would happen without them. Next up, we've got the head unit. Now this is from TI's. Basically, this is an Android head unit. So imagine having a tablet that's just installed into your car. It has built-in storage, so it has SSD storage. So what that means is when I don't have reception, I have all my songs downloaded into Spotify, so I can play anything I want, whether I have reception or not. Podcasts, music, doesn't matter. I can download maps for offline maps. And because it's an Android unit, I got rid of the TI's launcher. So the thing that presents the apps to you, I've got Nova Launcher, and what this allows me to do is put shortcuts in. So you see I've got a few apps here around the screen, but there's also gestures I can use to open Explorers, open Wikicamps, Calculator, and I think, yeah, so Google Maps will direct me home because I've installed in Nova Launcher gesture shortcuts, so I can double tap, Google Assistant comes up. I haven't got the hotspot on at the moment, so it's going to be a little bit slow, but you can install a SIM card into this. I just use it from Wi-Fi through the phone hotspot. You can run Android Auto and Apple CarPlay through this. I personally run them natively for reasons that I explained in the install video I won't go into now. The best way that you can utilize it is by getting Nova Launcher and going through the settings, playing with the look and feel. You can have more than one screen. For me, I don't use it as a phone, so I've only got one screen, but I've got shortcuts. So the biggest positive for me is the flexibility you can use because it's an Android unit, and also it was dirt cheap. The third positive being storage. Everything is stored on this device. I can listen to whatever I want, whenever I want. The fascia that they send out is so much better than the Air Pro stuff that they get with other kits. This top section is great. It's got a rubber mat. It's nice large storage. So the negatives, the phone charging is slow. In summer, it sometimes doesn't charge at all. In winter, it tends to charge a little bit faster. Steering wheel controls, I cannot use the middle button of my steering wheel, which is annoying. I wish I could press this for voice control, as in like Google Assistant would pop up. All the other ones work just fine. I do wish it was done by a more reputable company, say for example Samsung. I think they could make it even better than it is. So the TI's unit is great, but I just feel like there's no support. So if you have issues and stuff, the support is very bad. It's like WhatsApp messaging engineers and stuff. It just feels dodgy. So yeah, the CAN bus settings and stuff didn't work for me on this car. That was pretty crap. I had to go through, install steering wheel controls. It was a major hassle to install it. Hopefully it's better on other cars, but for this specific model of car, the installation was an absolute pain in the ass, but it's dirt cheap and way better than like the rip-off stuff from Kenwood and Alpine, which I think are massively overpriced and don't offer the same functionality. Not perfect, but it was the best I found and I'm still enjoying it. So one last thing that I hate, there is a shortcut for voice control in here, but you can't set it to Google Assistant. They want to use their own voice control, and there's no way in hell I'm going to be using their voice assistant, so I've just canned that altogether. The long range fuel tank comes in at number 6. Now, I didn't really expect this to be so high on my ratings list when I was thinking about it, but I can't imagine living with an 80 litre tank again. I think the 140 litres, even though I don't tow and even though I don't need it because I'm not going across the Simpson Desert or whatever, it's just, even in everyday life, it is handy. So yes, I carry around more weight, and it was about $1,300. And a lot of the weight comes from the extra diesel capacity, not just the weight of the tank. But to me, the value in having it and not having to go to the servo so often and being able to go a long way without even thinking about filling up, going through sand dunes, getting into low range, churning through the diesel and not really having that sense of worry in your mind. I can't imagine going back to a car with a normal sized tank. If you tow, I would say long range tank is a necessity because otherwise you're carrying a lot of jerry cans or you are filling up very frequently. Getting all the fuel in one spot, it's not in the back in the jerry can holders. The weight is down low. Nobody can come by and just nick the jerry can full of diesel, and I don't have to fill it up again from the jerry. You lose a tiny bit of ground clearance, but the thing is so solid down there. I'm not the least bit worried about whether that cops a hit or not. So yeah, when I installed it, I thought, this is just a bit of future proofing. But since then, and the more I've ridden around with the long range tank and the further I've gone without having to fill up, it's pushing the top 5, so that's how highly I rate the long range tanks. And that's not to do with ARB or anything, that's just long range tank in general. Alright, next up guys, I've got the compressor mounted up here. That is the ARB twin compressor. I have sort of made up my own little rig to mount it to the ceiling. Reason being is I wanted it hard mounted because you want deflating and inflating to be as easy as possible, because that is one of the biggest deterrences, I guess, to people wanting to use stuff, is that it's hard to use or it takes time. So to minimise time required, I've got hard mounted, permanently wired up. You don't have to open your bonnet, connect it to the batteries, but also twin compressor because it's quicker to reinflate your tyres compared to a single compressor. 100% duty cycle, I don't have to let it rest. Being up here, it gets hot. I'm not going to accidentally touch it. No kids are going to run by and accidentally touched it. So it's using up space that was otherwise not being used at all. It is permanently mounted and wired, and it's got the tank as well because it was the portable version. I just changed the mounting method. The only negatives I can think of, I guess, and it's really hard to think of any, would be the cost, because it would be cheaper to get a single compressor and possibly cheaper to not go with ARB. So the second part of this whole compressor setup is this little bracket. Now this comes in the portable compressor. The switch comes with the portable compressor, so does this little air hose. So what I've done, I've got the hose set up here. I can just plug that in, and this sets the compressor off and running. The portable one also comes with this air hose. Now this is cheap. I think ARB is really cheaped out with this. I've had it constantly leaking air, and I have to force the handle that way to stop it. So I don't rate this part of it at all, but it's handy to have to blow out bits of equipment, get sand out of things, blow out air filters. And my compressor runs off my lithium, and I have done the calculations to prove that it can be done. So I'm not worried about damaging the battery or anything like that. This pouch here, again, also comes with the portable compressor. So pretty much the whole system's ready to go. I just had to change the way it was mounted, terminate a few cables, and then I've got this permanently set up system. Inflating becomes so much easier, and it means you're more likely to deflate because you can inflate so quickly. All right, next on the list, we got the suspension. So I've got front and back. I've gone with the Outback Armour. The way I did it, I built the car up, I had the weight that I wanted, and I based the suspension off that. I've got a video about it. The improvement in handling, braking, acceleration, because it doesn't squat as much in any direction, it is astronomical. It makes the car, or it makes the ute feel like a car, I guess you could say. So it is just out of this world. So I've got adjustable bypass control, which changes the firmness. I've tried it at its softest and its hardest settings just to get a feel for each one. The front is probably 2/5 of the way in, and the rear is probably 3/5 of the way in. So the rear is a bit firmer than the front, and for me that's pretty good, set and forget. On top of the improved handling, makes the car safer to drive on road and off road, and obviously you get ground clearance as well. Not complete ground clearance because your diffs and that are the same, but you get clearance, you get a better approach angle, departure angles. It's night and day, the difference between pre and post install. It is, well, that's why it's so high on the list. It is one of the best things that I've done to the car by far. The only negative I can think of, I guess, and this is true of all suspension, is obviously IFS vehicles. You're risking CVs braking because you've got bigger CV angles. Some people report vibration in the drive shaft when doing the rears. I didn't have that. With the spacer kit, that seemed to fix the issue enough for me. And I guess cost is probably a big one for people. So I did the install myself, it's $3,000. That sounds like a lot of money, but some people spend between 5 and 15 on their suspension setup. So to me, not too big a cost. I expect to get hopefully 100K out of it, and then maybe just have to change the shocks. I'm not sure. I'll see how it fares over time. However, there is one other negative with this suspension setup, and I'll show you that on the back. So this is probably one of the worst times to try and prove this point because I'm not parked on level ground. I'm actually out in the sand dunes, but the suspension is leaning to the left quite heavily, and I've done some calculations about the weight differences in the car. Yes, the left side's heavier because you've got the battery, and I've got the long range fuel tank on the left hand side of the car, as well as the drawer table and the fridge. But with the driver in the driver's seat and another person standing on the infill steps I've got in the canopy on the far right, the car still doesn't level out. So I'm a little bit disappointed in the lean. I know there's more weight on the left hand side of the car, but when I'm in it and the right hand side's fully loaded up with gear, the weight difference is not that big. I Haven't changed the springs to see if it would make a difference because I just can't be bothered. It's a lot of work to fix something. It's not a massive issue for me. It's more annoying that it's doing it, but I can't say I've felt a difference in control in the car. All right, so we're into the top 3, and this one, I didn't actually install it. This bull bar was already on the car when I got it. This is a ARB Deluxe steel bull bar, winch compatible. This rates so highly because on the country road, I think it's a necessity because of kangaroos and possibly cattle, although it's probably not going to save you from a big cattle strike if you hit a bull or something like that. But even outside of that, protection that you get driving through the bush and tight tracks, it's just, you can't beat it. It's protecting your radiator and everything at the front of the car here. Gives you mounting points. You can mount antennas, AM, FM, UHF, cell-fire boosters, spotties, winches. The only negative I can think of is the weight that gets added to so far out the front of your car that it's not great for the axle load ratings or the suspension. Obviously you need to fit suspension to combat the droop. What's another negative? I wish it came with recovery points like the TJM one. I hate the fact that you can't remove the winch. To remove this winch, I basically have to take the whole bull bar off. I think there is a way you can do it with undoing some bottom bolts and twisting it out and stuff, but the point is you should be able to remove your winch with the bull bar intact because the winches are supposed to be serviced and re-greased. But as it stands at the moment, I just find myself not doing it because I can't be asked going through the whole process. And another negative is it adds length to your car, so parking can be an issue when you have a bull bar. If you have a tow ball on as well, your car might be about 6 meters long, which can be a pain sometimes. For most people going off-road, I think you need one. Now, coming in at second is the ultra gauge system. Yeah, it might surprise a few people, but for me, being able to calibrate my speed, knowing how many litres I've got after you calibrate your fuel calibration with a long range tank, it's getting all the information like your distance to empty, my engine and automatic transmission fluid temperatures, and you can customise these pages. So there's 8 gauges here, the other one had 4, so I had a bigger display with my speedo. I love having all this information, ambient intake, we've got pressures, engine control module voltage, kilometres that I've done since the oil change, so probably due for a service soon, time to empty, average litres per kilometre. You can reset that. This page I've just set up for trip metrics. You can have 8 pages and you can have 8 gauges on each page. This one is just from key to key. Obviously I haven't started the car, so that's going to be blank. I've set it up with 4 pages. This one I've got 6. This is my page 1. This is what it stays on most of the time. Sometimes I'll flick to the other pages to check. Ultra gauge for me, having all this information available, a true speed readout, because the speedo is completely wrong by about 6 or 7 k's an hour. True speed that matches GPS speed, instantaneous litres per kilometre, transmission and engine temps. This information for me is just vital, and I love having it here on the A pillar. I don't have to take my eyes off the road to check my speed. I can sort of see it as I'm looking at the road. 100% accuracy, level litres, knowing what you've got with a full range tank. You can't do that with your fuel gauge, it doesn't actually tell you, but I know to within, depends on how you're driving and stuff, but it's pretty accurate to within about 2 litres. Yeah, pretty happy with the ultra gauge. So that brings me on to number 1, and it was an easy choice for me. I was kind of thinking, oh, I can't really include that as number 1, it's too easy, but if it's easy, it's easy. It is what it is, and that's the canopy. I should hope that it's my favourite because it was the most expensive by a long way. Canopy is the hub of everything that you do when you're camping. Having the big gull-wing doors, being able to access everything, I enjoy it so much more than I would a tub and ute style canopy. All the added benefits, obviously you pay for it all, but for example, now this is an extra cab, so I do have a little bit of extra length, but I've got trundle drawer, and then in front of that I've got a 60 litre water tank. In here is just stuff that I wouldn't have to access all the time, but it's out of the way. I can lock it up, it's down low, it gets pushed forward towards the rear axle. Tools, socket sets, you know, power tools, tyre changing stuff, things that I hopefully don't have to grab too frequently. But then I've also got this thing made up that just serves as a table, which is perfect with the gas bottles there. Brilliant. On top of that, I got 2 jerry can holders. Now, I don't actually use them for jerry cans at the moment. I've got a jerry box in here for storage, so I just store things that I want to keep clean because this is kind of dust proof. This isn't. A rear tyre install. I could remove that, and that gives me bench space there as well. So where the tyre is, I've got this ledge here. The other thing is the length of the canopy. Concept canopies do custom builds, unlike a lot of the other mobs that if you have an extra cab, you get a 2100 tray and that's it. This is only 1800 long, so ordinarily an extra cab would be sticking out to here. It would be an extra 300 mil. I wanted a shorter car. I wanted the weight of everything forward. Concept canopies do that because they just build what you want. So you can imagine something and they'll build it for you. If I went another 150, I'd still be 150 short of the normal length, and I'd have a longer trundle drawer as well. Behind each of the wheels, I've got these boxes. So in here, I've just got pegs and mats, and I've got winch dampers. Everything's so easy and accessible. So because I've got the extra cab as well, I do have this infill panel, these steps as well. Now this whole canopy was 250 kilos. It was the exact same weight as the heavy duty steel tray that came with the car. That in itself is incredible. So I haven't really added weight. It is heavier than like a tub and canopy setup, but it's the same weight as it was before, plus all the stuff I put inside. But nothing's perfect, so negatives. The tap that came with it came off. It was a twist top, so you had better flow control. This is a quarter turn. I am going to replace this because it annoys me. The original one was much better, but the actual turning knob came off one day. Not sure if it got smashed with a stick or something, or it was just corrugations or whatever, but yeah, the tap that came with the canopy came off. Cost is another negative for canopies in general, not with Concept. They were cheaper than some of the lesser build quality ones out there. Generally speaking, for aluminium gull wing canopies is high, and it's higher now than it was when I paid for mine as well. I do wish that they had some north-south extrusion. All the extrusion runs sort of east-west, but I like to tie things across this way, and I've put this in, so it's kind of fixed the problem anyway, but it would have been nice if they had something, say like a channel running in the floor, but I can understand that that would be annoying because it would catch water and debris. I am pretty happy with this setup because it can be removed as well. I can't really think of too many other negatives with the canopy itself because everything about it so far has proven to be really good. The only other negative I can think of, the locks for the trundle drawer and the rear wheel toolboxes can be a little bit finicky. Once you get used to it, you get used to it, but at the start it was kind of annoying trying to get these locked and unlocked. I don't think these locks are the best. The latch and everything's fine. Just the actual key barrel itself is probably the only other negative I can think of right now off the top of my head. Everything else is pretty good. All right, so that is the list from 40 to 1 with the canopy coming out on top. It's pretty hard to go past that one. Then I got the ultra gauge, the bull bar, and then things like the compressor and the suspension and stuff are rated very highly. It's not that I dislike any of the mods that were lower down on the list. Some of them haven't been tested properly. Some of them lose points just because they're not necessary whatsoever. But there were a few things I didn't talk about, like the floodlights on the front. I've installed the firelights, the Luxus 5000s, so I haven't even set the angle or anything. They're quite new. Floodlights are good for country driving, nighttime driving out in the open spaces, but without actually using them specifically, I don't want to rate them just yet. Another thing I forgot to rate, I even did it, was the gas bottle holder. I've turned the jerry can box on the back of the canopy wall into a gas bottle holder. That's just some molded plastic, heating it up and bending it. Yeah, that's going well. It did disform itself in the wet weather when the gas bottles weren't actually in there. From getting wet and drying out, it started to curve and bend. And at the moment, the gas bottles aren't sitting too pretty. Honestly, I just forgot about that when I was writing the list. So yeah, that's a handy one to have. I've got a gas bottle and a redundancy bottle. So when one goes empty, I can fill that one up and move the next one into the spot that is for use. So I do like that, just didn't rate it yet. I've also done an engine tune, and I am going to talk about that later on, but I want to run some numbers as far as fuel efficiency. I'm trying to do some testing and stuff. I mean, it drives so much better, that much I can say, but I didn't put it in the list of 40 mods because I haven't fully talked about it yet. What else? I've done some other little mods, like just things to the canopy. I've installed hooks and washing line, just using like shoelaces and different bits of rope and stuff. There are other little things that I've got going on that are working pretty well that I haven't quite talked about, but they're quite small ticket items. So that is the list from 40 to 1. Just feel free to have a chat in the comments because obviously everything's personal preference. I doubt many people would have ultra gauge as number 2 in their own lists, but I love having all that information at hand. Disagree, agree? What would you rate as your top 5? For me, I was surprised the ultra gauge came out as high as it did, but considering the cost of it at about $170 or maybe $200 when you include the bracketry, then it's just hard to go past. Canopy, a clear number 1 for me, then the ultra gauge, and then a bull bar, which is just a generic necessary item to have. Anyway, that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. Well, just so I can not go. I can't deny nobody makes enough. Smaller fit, you got less standby pattern. The negative is it's not necessary. Yeah, and I'd have a longer trundle tray as well.